Welcome, everyone. We are getting started here. We got to admit everybody into the waiting room. And despite it being a virtual setting, it can take a while for some people to move from the waiting room into the meeting. And I need to turn the waiting room on. All right, well, we will handle some procedural things first before we get started. Allow folks a little extra time to get into the room before we start the conversation today. I appreciate everyone being here. Hope everyone had a good weekend and a good Monday. We are going to be focusing today on elements of program accessibility as part of our study for the legislature on a design of a statewide energy assistance program. As we've talked about before, this is a project, and we'll look at the proviso here in a second, where we are not recommending a design of a program, but we are, or we're not recommending a program, I should say, but we are asked by the legislature to make a recommendation of a design for one if the legislature choose to pursue such a proposal. So we are going to start. I'm going to open up my presentation. You should be able to see my slides. Is that right, James?
Looks good.
All right. So my name is Austin Sharp. I'm an energy policy specialist at the Washington State Department of Commerce. I work in the energy policy office here, and I am joined by James Vogel, who works in research services, which is a part of Commerce. It's kind of serves as our internal consulting office, and James helped us on this last workshop, and I've heard a lot of good comments, thankful comments for James, who takes notes during our meeting. So thank you, James. And James will be assisting us in the same function today. So the Department of Commerce, Washington State, handles a number of programs, all with the goal of strengthening communities. As you can see here, we work on housing and homelessness, energy policy, economic development, small business assistance across the state. So let's talk about that proviso that we're gathered here to talk about today. So the state legislature this past year in the budget commissioned a study for Commerce to look at and develop recommendations on a design for a statewide energy assistance program to address the energy burden and provide access to energy assistance for low-income households. And this proviso followed a report that we issued back in February, March about statewide, or about energy assistance statewide under our 100% clean electricity law, the Clean Energy Transformation Act. And in that report, one of our key findings was that the statewide utility-run energy assistance program serve a small portion of customers compared to state low-income programs with similar eligibility requirements, like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, commonly known as SNAP. And so we looked at that. There was a requirement in the law for us to evaluate what is called a system benefits charge, which is a charge placed on utilities. The charge then goes towards a statewide low-income energy assistance program, or would do so. And we found a number of benefits to that, as well as some of the other mechanisms that we evaluated. But for that particular one of the statewide approach, we saw that it would be beneficial to provide universal access to low-income households for energy assistance, regardless of the where they lived in the state, or how they heated their home or powered their home, whether it be natural gas, electricity, propane, or wood. The program participation element was another potential benefit, potentially cross-enrolling folks, or being able to at least use a statewide platform for low-income energy assistance program to raise awareness at the very least. We found benefits for targeting those most in need. We looked at that system benefits charge and observed that if every energy customer in the state was contributing to a low-income energy assistance fund, it would reduce costs overall statewide for utility customers and avoid potential rate hikes. Reduced the admin costs were another benefit, and potential reliable funding. So those were some of the things that kind of came to mind, and legislature said, okay, we're actually interested in knowing more about how this would actually work in practice. So we were sat out with this proviso and asked to look at a number of key things here: data collection on energy burden assistance need, that universal intake coordination and data sharing piece, program eligibility, enrollment and administration, multicultural services and outreach and community engagement, funding and reporting. And we were told that we needed to have this done by January 1st, 2024, which in practice means we need to have it done in October. And we are right now completing the paperwork to try and get that extended to June of 2024. And we expect for that to be approved. So that's our operating assumption now, is that we'll be working on this. And so 2 or 3 months before June, we'll have to be wrapping it up and getting it over to the Office of Financial Management for them to kind of do their thing and get it ready for the legislature. So today, workshop, we are going to focus on some of those elements that I discussed earlier, and under the concept of accessibility. And so what does it mean for a program to be accessible, and how would we measure program accessibility is going to be a key question that we start our workshop with. We're then going to discuss how we achieve flexibility under the different elements that the legislature identified in its study. That's program eligibility, enrollment, outreach, community engagement, and multicultural services. So we'll touch on all of these, and we'll do that. And then barring that we have time at the end, I would like to save some time to update you all on our schedule, our illustrative schedule for how this work will roll out. The short answer is, with that extension, we're going to have more time, and so we're going to be spending this summer kind of doing the general work on touching on these different program elements, and collecting kind of everyone's perspective on those through these conversations and written comment periods. We'll then work on that in-house and come back in the fall, early winter, so November, December, to kind of do some more working on that. And then in 2024, we'll probably be spending our time reviewing drafts and fine-tuning different pieces. So today is kind of our opening conversation for the topic of program accessibility broadly, and we will be revisiting program accessibility multiple times beyond today, including the comment period that will follow today's workshop. And those comments will be due on August 11th, which is Friday, which is Friday, I should say. And finally, along with those comments, we are going to be asking folks to complete a survey to identify low-income organizations in their communities that they regularly work with and they think should be contacted as part of our work to talk to organizations to inform this study. All right, so we are now going to turn to the elements of accessibility and open that document up from James. But before we do that, I just wanted to pause, see if there's any questions about what we're doing today or about the general framework. All right, well, James, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can share yours. So today we're going to start with this broad question of what does it mean for a statewide program to be accessible, and how do you measure if it is accessible? And part of this work is kind of fine-tuning questions, asking additional questions. We did some work at our last workshop to identify questions and considerations for this work, and thankful for that. I reviewed those this past weekend to help inform this workshop. But we're definitely going to come up with more questions as we go through this work, and we'll have to investigate those, more things for us to consider and fine-tune our questions. So the first thing that I would like to ask James to do is strike the word statewide. I think it's helpful to just think about, and many people on this call are from utilities. So, I think any program, what does it mean for it to be accessible? And how do you measure that at the end of the day, whether the program is? So this is the high level question of today. So I'll open it up for questions or for comments.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I needed to raise my hand or if I could just interject or.
Yeah, jump in.
Sorry, I'm gonna get my camera going so you guys know I'm a real person. So I think for us here, so we're a service provider and we've seen a severe uptick in individuals needing utility assistance. Most of our prevention funds in the last few months have gone to getting utilities reinstated or preventing the disconnection of. A lot of people don't know how to access, I guess, to access programs, right? And we're in Pierce County, we use 211 is our access point for just broad general information. We utilize our social media, our website. However, there's a lot of people that have barriers to technology. And I think that more outreach could be done to make sure that people that are, in those outskirts or people that lack the access to a technology, can have a better chance of knowing about these resources and, being able to access them, I guess, if you will. I've worked on trying to measure it based on just my own internal spreadsheets, the phone calls that we receive. And a lot of people, they end up borrowing cell phones. They end up going to other agencies where an agency will utilize 211 for them and say, hey, this agency has this information. And so I'll get phone calls from other agencies saying, hey, we have somebody that we think could fit within your criteria. And they'll schedule that direct appointment with me as a warm kind of handoff and, helping out the people that are in need of these services. So.
Thanks, Jennifer. Could you tell us a little bit more about your organization? It sounds like you're in Pierce County, but kind of give us a sense of the work that you do, what programs you work with, the folks that come to see you.
Right. Excuse me. So we're LASA, and we are located in Lakewood. We have a few different programs. We do permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing housing, and just permanent housing. We do a lot of prevention services. And so we did, historically we've done rent assistance, utility assistance, license reinstatement, certification, licensing for employment or education. So we currently, after we also facilitated the COVID-19 rent assistance with Pierce County and directly with the city of Tacoma. So we started seeing a lot of the other prevention dollars that we had, there wasn't a high demand for it because those COVID dollars paid for basically everything everybody was struggling to provide. But now that we're moving out of COVID, we're starting to see, again, even more so than prior to COVID, the uptick in need for utilities, and still a large one for rent. So yeah, we do the prevention services and we have housing programs.
Perfect. Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks for joining us today. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I believe John sang, and I think we had a question that was good from Yoki. It says, who's here today? And so I don't know if that was directed at Jennifer or the group at large, but it's great to put that in the chat, and feel free to put your comments in the chat as well. We can gather those at the end of the workshop, and we won't have time to hear from everybody verbally. So feel free to throw things in the chat. We might not get to talking about them today, but we'll have them and we'll review them and put them in this document at the end of this workshop and get those posted on the webpage. All right, John.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. I wrote down a few recommendations when I was thinking about this last night. This first one is a little bit of, assigning an arbitrary metric, but one of my suggestions would be takes less than an hour to enroll in the program. Obviously, you can't predict exactly how long it'll take to enroll, but I feel pretty strongly that folks shouldn't have to spend, for example, an entire day jumping through various hoops to get enrolled. I've been seeing some stuff about language in the chat, and I think having assistance and outreach materials available in, for example, like the top 10 languages or so spoken in Washington would be great. And then just a variety of options. Obviously, some folks are going through social service agencies, but also making it really easy to sign up through phone, computer, or in person. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, John, for your comments. John, do you mind telling us where what your organization is?
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, my name is John Sang. I work as policy manager for Spark Northwest. We work in partnership with marginalized communities across the Northwest to design and build clean energy projects.
All right, thanks, John. Yoki.
Hello, my name is Yoki Zakai, and I work with the Energy Project. Apologies if anything that I'm about to say is repetitive of what you've heard in previous workshops, but I think that, as John mentioned, focusing on enrollment is really important for accessibility. And so I would say that an accessible program would have two kind of avenues for enrollment. One would be automatically based on enrollment in another means tested program, and then another would be by request specifically for this program.
All right, thanks, Yoki.
Can I keep going with some others?
Yeah, go for it.
So another thing that I'd say is that outreach for the program should occur through community-based organizations. So that's really working with folks who are trusted messengers in the community, and folks who are known. And then the last thing that I would mention, it kind of relates to the enrollment that I mentioned, and that is that agencies providing other types of assistance to low-income customers should be able to be an access point to the program as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Yoki. I see some other good question or good comments here in the chat from folks. From Shell and Elsie and others here. So thank you for those. Jeff. Oh, Jeff had his hand raised. No, he's gone. Are you there? Still there,
Oh,
Jeff?
I am. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Austin, this is Jeff Feinberg, Sandwich County PUD. And I just wanted to say we don't necessarily have a direct comment about accessibility. I agree with a lot of what Yogi said, but for us, we are really focused on increasing our auto enrollment and streamline enrollment opportunities for customers because what we do know is whether it's our own income verification and application process for our programs, that is a limit to accessibility or not. We know that there are other organizations that are talking to and have relationships with customers that we don't, right? And so we're just trying to, where we can, increase those auto enroll and streamline enrollment opportunities. And the other kind of key piece is, we do believe that, once a customer has kind of gone through the rigor to get accepted by a qualifying organization, it is important for us, to find a way to not make them have to tell that story all over again because of sometimes how arduous that process can be. So we are always thinking about accessibility. We've not necessarily done the kind of analysis to understand where all the barriers to accessibility might be for our programs. But kind of part of what we're trying to do to mitigate some of that is, again, build these relationships with other people doing, the right work in our community to that same customer that we're hoping to engage with.
Thanks, Jeff. That comment. Anyone else have any general observations? And this is, again, kind of our first cut at questions like these to discuss them together. And then the formal comment period, you can think about these, some of these conceptual questions more and submit comments on these again. Yoki.
Yeah, so the second part of your question goes to measurement of accessibility, and I'm really glad that you asked about that, because I think it's really important that we not only have goals and ideas, but we say, okay, are we being effective at reaching the people that we want to? So in terms of how do you measure if a program is accessible, I think the first thing to do would be to track the demographics of customers that are enrolled. And then after you're tracking the demographics of who you're serving, then you can compare the demographics of the population that you're serving to the demographics in that census block or that zip code, or you can compare those demographics to a measure of low-income people in a particular area. But tracking demographics, looking at highly impacted communities and vulnerable populations, and figuring out, are we enrolling the, people that match, the community and people in the community that match that need, I think would be a really essential thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Yoki. All right, well, I'm of the mindset that we've talked about this a little bit and got ideas out here, a lot of great ideas from folks. This is a big concept and a big thing to think about how this would work. So encourage folks to continue to think about this and submit written comments, and we'll go through that process at the end of today. I'm thinking for now, James, let's move on to kind of our next question. These questions here are largely in the formal comment section, but again, provided for us to begin a discussion today. And I originally had a whole bunch of questions around eligibility and accessibility of the program. And I decided to kind of trim those back to a few here today, and acknowledge that we'll need to come back to this later, but see kind of where we are on some of these crucial ones first. I put in here, the question of how do we achieve accessibility through the following design elements, and looking at eligibility and what principles should really guide us here. And the thing that I saw a lot in the comments, folks spoke to this issue, and where we're going is to look at income thresholds, whether it's 200% of the federal poverty level, 80% of area median income, state median income, some percentage of that. And a lot of folks stressed that it needed to be consistent across for the state program. And with the Clean Energy Transformation Act, it has two, which I think maybe is what drove that comment about consistency. The Clean Energy Transformation Act, again, is not a statewide program. It's a law for utility run programs in the state. And it says you can use either 200% FPL or 80% AMI for your program like that. Those are the highest you can go for these thresholds. So consistency was one, but I was wondering if anybody else had any principles on eligibility that they'd want to throw out there for us to consider. I struggled thinking of any, but we might unpack those as we go. So let's keep that question there, James, because I'd like to revisit that and look at this income threshold question. Should the income threshold for a program be 200% of the federal poverty level, 80% of the area median income, or a certain percentage of state median income? And in our comments that we received, and James is putting those together for us, and they'll be available for everyone to see at the end of the week. We had folks articulate that, for instance, the federal poverty level, their argument was that would be inadequate for areas of the state like Seattle, which has a much higher per capita income, and then say rural areas of the state. I didn't see the argument in there, but I think that the argument for using an area median income, would be that you would capture those higher income levels in Seattle and other urban areas of the state. But if you use an area median income, and I haven't done the math, the homework yet, but I think the concern in rural areas would be that it might be below the federal poverty level, and whether we would be comfortable with that. And then there is the state median income, which no one has really offered, but there are a couple utilities that have been using that prior to CETA and are transferring away from that. So I just wanted to offer those thresholds and also for discussion. And then another crucial piece, which we won't be discussing today, is, how does this line up with other state programs? Like Yoki mentioned, hey, can we auto enroll folks? Well, that might, the ability to connect with other state programs might depend on the eligibility requirements in those programs. So we will do an evaluation and bring that forward in future conversations. for folks to consider, but this is kind of our first pass at this question. So what income threshold for eligibility should there be? So Kelly, you got your hand up.
Thanks, Austin. Can you hear me okay?
I can, and please tell us your organization too, everyone, as you come on.
Sure. Kelly Hawk with Big Bend Electric Co-op. In our area, which is located in Eastern Washington, I will say the program that captures, I would say, the majority of our low-income customers would be the LIHEAP program. And following their guidelines, or at the very least the CETA 200% of federal poverty level, I believe would be a good way to start. As far as cross-qualifying members, we've talked a lot about ease of entry, easy participation, and I think, at least for our area, if we're able to cross-qualify people through LIHEAP, not necessarily auto-enroll, but definitely cross-qualifying those that are already getting LIHEAP funds, that's going to capture a large portion of our members that are in that low-income status.
Thank you, Kelly. Wonderful. Yoki.
Hey, Yoki Zakai again with the energy project. I think what we found in working with the investor-owned utilities is that the concern that you discussed about using one versus the other can be mitigated by saying the higher of 200% FPL or 80% AMI. And by doing that, you're able to capture both the minimum threshold of 200% FPL, which is more likely to apply in lower income counties of the state, and the 80% AMI, which is more likely to occur in the higher income counties in the state. And I think that's that's kind of the consensus that we've reached with a lot of the investor-owned utilities, and aligns well with the definition in CETA, and that's what I would recommend using for a statewide program as well. And to cover the question below, does that is it available for folks who have higher income than LIHEAP? Then by default, the answer to that is yes. And I think a key part about extending the benefits of the program to folks that reach the level of 80% AMI is to tier the discounts such that those that are most in need are provided more assistance. Thank you.
Thanks, Yoki. And we're going to get into the tiered discussion versus other alternative structures at the next workshop too. So hold those thoughts on those points for the next one as well. Anybody else? Any suggestion other than what Yoki put on the table for considerations?
I would just add, if I can, Austin, I think it'll be really helpful if your report is able to, provide an assessment of current, state-run programs and their income levels, and then using, because I think that's a resource. I haven't seen that all written down in one place yet, and it will be helpful as we think about categorical eligibility for this program and other assistance programs that are available across the state. So I'm glad to hear you're thinking about that, and I think it'd be a really valuable resource.
Yeah, thanks, Yoki. And James is on it. He's working on that when he gets time. So we're plugging away at that and bring that back to the group to look at as well. Thanks, Yoki, and thanks, Jennifer, for the comments? And then doesn't sound like we have anyone favor of like a state median income, a definition there, but please consider that as well. If we don't have any comments here, let's move on to the next question, which Yoki touched on, but if there's anybody else who has any thoughts on this. This was a submitted in the comments, a question about, whether we should be helping out, I think the LIHEAP group, or should the program be broader than that group of households? Not necessarily those that are receiving LIHEAP, but it's basically the same eligibility criteria as LIHEAP or something broader. And Yoki's comments were that we would broaden that out a little bit more in line with where utility programs generally are at this point. Not all of them are there, but most are. Okay, well, I wanted to provide space for that question. If you do have comments on that one more, you can always throw it in the formal comment form. Thanks, Stephanie, for your comment there. Thanks, Jean. All right, James, let's roll on. It seems like folks have there's some general consensus around some of this work, it seems to me, and so we will proceed kind of with that consensus and take that into account when we read comments and see if anyone else has anything else to offer there at that time. So let's talk about enrollment. And so the question here is kind of about principles for guiding enrollment in a program. These are ones that I offered at the last workshop, so I thought I would put them here. That it'd be convenient, fast, easy, and a secondary objective because it's not a primary objective that seems to stand out from the statute, but would be to help connect folks to other social service programs. And this is something that we generally heard in the comments that we received. They would like to make sure folks are connected in some way to getting help in other areas as well, not just energy assistance. Any other principles folks would like to put on the table? They can be more detailed, they can be broader. Okay, let's move on then, James. If folks have things they can put in the formal comment. So this is kind of going back to that measurement question. How should successful program enrollment be measured beyond overall program participation numbers? So some folks talked about enrollment being less than an hour. John offered that. Anybody else have anything that they would like to add at this time? John.
Thanks again, Austin. I am just thinking of this now as I'm speaking, so it might not come out fully formed, but Yoki mentioned some sort of comparison between demographics of enrolled customers and demographics of the census tract, for example, where they are living, and some sort of comparison between those two could give a rough estimate of successful enrollment of everyone who needs it.
Thanks, Sean. I'm not sure, but at some point we might want to unpack, what's all in demographics. I don't think that's for today's workshop, but maybe in the future. Yoki.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. I agree. I was just going to say, repeat what I said above about demographics. I think, it's important, to track the demographics of who we're enrolling and then comparing it to an estimate of low income customers and comparing it to other identifications of vulnerable populations and highly impacted communities to make sure we really are helping the most vulnerable and highly impacted. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Yoki. It's helpful. James, did you get that? See above or something like that? All right, Charity.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no
My
worries.
camera is not working, but yes, maybe similar to what others have mentioned, maybe do a study like a county population study for eligible, basically determining an eligibility population for each of the different counties. And then based on that, then we would be able to determine what percentage of that population has been penetrated.
Perfect. Thanks, Charity.
Thank you.
Megan. Charity's from Pacific Core. She got that in her name. Megan, where are you calling from?
Hi, sorry, my org's not in my name, but I'm calling from Climate Solutions. Another way to, I guess this gets to the first question of tracking participation numbers, but measuring or tracking how many payments are how many late payments essentially, how many customers are behind on their energy bills, because if more are enrolled in an assistance program, then I think we should see fewer late payments because they'll be receiving that assistance. So that would be a way to track how many folks who are struggling with paying their bills are receiving that assistance.
Right. Thanks, Megan. That comment.
Hey, Austin, this is Lisa Fix from Clark Public Utilities. How are you?
Hey, Lisa. Good to hear from you. Thanks for just jumping in.
Oh, well, I'm not on video, so I was just trying to get in, see if that was possible. But I had a quick question, or I had a quick comment, I guess. Do we know, or is there a way to measure success based off the same county information that you might have for LIHEAP participation levels? So if you have a county, for instance, that participates at maybe like a 10%, I'm using just numbers that I'm pulling out of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you can participate in LIHEAP at 10%. I would hope that the new program or a statewide program would try to get beyond the LIHEAP, or at least measure success if they're reaching people. Because if you're still reaching the same people and you're just providing additional assistance, you may not be getting the most vulnerable customers. Because I know that we have a lot of customers that they're ready on October 1st. They get the process, they get the program, they know the steps, they're dialing in to get their appointment. They're just much more, it's easier for them, I guess. They've done it a few times, but we have a lot of counties. This is what we're trying to mitigate, is the counties that are currently not utilizing maybe their LIHEAP monies, or their county has a lot of low-income people and they're not even getting their LIHEAP money out. So maybe a measure of penetration, if you're going to use LIHEAP, as a plus LIHEAP, this much percentage plus LIHEAP, or I don't know. I'm trying to think about how do you extend a program to really get to the most vulnerable people, and how do you measure that if you're still just going to get the same people if you use LIHEAP, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you brainstorming, Lisa, and sharing that. I hadn't, I think my initial reaction is the you know, eligibility criteria, that sort of thing, but there is a very good, I think there's a lot there to unpack in terms of, you know, making sure that the program is broader than the current energy assistance, you know, that federal program. And, you know, trying to, I think it's worth, you know, thinking about how we would, you know, what's the useful measure there. You know, I guess I'd have to think about it. I guess I was thinking about it more in terms of the conversation we'll have at our next workshop about deliverability of assistance and like how, you know, that federal program interacts with this theoretical statewide program. You know, how do we make sure that that LIHEAP stuff is working and that we're using those federal funds and exhausting those. So yeah, no, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I appreciate you calling in and offering that.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this particular topic? Okay, well, I think the next two questions are the real meat of the conversation, and we'll see variations of these questions throughout today's workshop. And one of those questions is, let's look at them together first, and then we'll take one question and then do the bottom one. So at our last workshop, there were kind of two proposed models for this statewide energy assistance program. Okay, what would this look like? And one is this, what was termed the one-stop shop model, where there is a statewide entity administering a program. It's taking on the admin functions. It is administering enrollment, you know, doing a lot of outreach and community engagement, likely with community partners. But again, the administrator of the program is a statewide entity, is the idea. And then other folks put on the table the clearinghouse model, which is where utilities, the statewide program aspect is more of an information that's trying to help you know, determine what is assistance need, what is energy burden in areas, then provide information on, you know, low-income households in the service territories of the utilities to be enrolled at some point or somehow in energy assistance. So those are kind of the two models that we're going to look through things today and in the comment period. And then I'm not sure if on this document, if we have this, you know, do we have any alternatives? But that is on the comment form in the formal area, on the formal comment form for folks after this workshop. But I think today we're largely going to focus just on these two models. Do we have questions about those two concepts themselves before we jump in? I think it's worth spending some time thinking about that before we start answering the questions. Yeah.
Could you give a little more definition around the clearinghouse model and what utilities would have to do in that model?
Yeah,
if anything.
Yeah, that's a great question. This clearinghouse model was put on the table last time by Snohomish PUD, and Ryan and Jeff, they messaged me and said they had to jump from this meeting for a half hour, which I understand because this is a 3-hour meeting. And I really asked them to help clarify what the proposal is here for this model. But my understanding is basically the state is providing the information. Like I said, the low-income households, you know, these are the ones that are enrolled in these different programs and they're in your service territory. And here's what energy burden, energy assistance need looks like for your territory. So kind of handling some of that data piece, which utilities mentioned is very difficult for them at the last workshop. And to me, that's kind of the extent of it. Utilities then must administer the programs. I don't know if there are requirements to, make sure those customers are enrolled. What does the funding situation look like? Are utilities all funding their own programs? But I'm not exactly sure how it would work, and I think part of this group that we're going to be discussing is trying to figure out what that would look like. And then we have this other model that is much more, a statewide entity responsible for program outcomes and doing the work. Is how I kind of simplistically put it in my mind. I don't know, is that helpful, Pam? And I don't know if Snohomish is on or somebody else has any ideas or suggestions.
Yes, that's very helpful. I just want to interject that Snohomish PUD is the largest PUD in the state and can easily take on all of the things you just mentioned, whereas there are PUDs that have as little as 6 to 10 employees, and this would be impossible for them to do. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, thanks, Pam, for the general comment on that. And I'm wondering, since we're on it and we've got you, your hand raised, do you want to speak kind of to the enrollment piece for your utility? If you have any thoughts on that aspect in particular, and if you don't at this time, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I don't at this time. I want to go back and talk to my utility about that.
Yeah,
And I will inform you. So thank you for the opportunity.
yeah, no problem. Thanks for being engaged, asking.
Hey, Austin, this is Lisa again. I have a thought about that. If you're thinking about a statewide program that's attached to some other state program that you at the state level has identified the individual people who are participating, how difficult would it be for you to provide a list by name that, of course, I'm no IT expert, but I'm wondering how difficult it would be for you to provide a list of names that then a utility could just go through and apply the credits that the state is saying this person already participates in TANF or there's something with housing or whatever the marker would be, and you just said, hey, they would get, X amount of dollars of a grant, and there isn't an enrollment piece that comes from people coming to administering things, but it was simply a list.
Mm-hmm. No, good question. And, that would be a question we would need to explore under this. And like you, I'm not too aware of what limitations may exist there. I know folks have pointed to other states that have tried to make strides on this recently, and it'd be good to reach out and see how that is going, even though it's just like a brand new thing that they're doing, and what kind of requirements. Folks have questions about data privacy, other things. So there's a whole bundle of issues. I think there's a whole bundle of the similar issues, depending on what statewide entity would administer a one-stop shop model. So in the report we contemplated, just at a high level, we identified DSHS, of course, because they run so many of these programs already. We have Commerce because of the LIHEAP connection. We do a lot of the federal pass-through, so we do have capacity to do that sort of thing. And then an independent entity, separate from state government, and that would pose its own challenges as well, I'd assume, but they might be different. There might be some other way of setting that up. So good questions, Lisa and James. Put it down here, and James, continue to, add the questions, comments. Appreciate it. Kelly.
Thanks, Austin. Again, Kelly Hawk with Big Bend Electric Co-op. I think by far the better model to use would be one-stop shop for multiple reasons. One of which, consistency of programs. If you have utilities each facilitating their own program, I guarantee each one would have their own forms, their own application process, their own qualifying information. So I think as far as the state running that, just for ease and convenience too, for convenience for the low income participants who are applying. Through CETA, for instance, we started our own program to try to comply with CETA. And here we go again, we have new forms for these members to fill out, in addition to what they're filling out for LIHEAP, DSHS, or whoever else. So yet another form they're filling out, yet more hoops to jump through. They're having to supply the same information they're supplying down the street. So I think a one-stop shop would be a far better model, as well as, not to mention, coming from a not-for-profit co-op. In order to do this from a utility perspective, we would have to increase our staff, which means increasing rates. We're not-for-profit co-op. We can't dig into deep pockets and just come out with more money. So increasing rates, I think, would ultimately go backwards on what we're trying to do here.
Thanks, Kelly, for your comments. Yoki.
Hey, Yoki Zakai with the Energy Project again. I'm gonna describe some different things just to put them on the table and not, express preferences right now. So when you're looking at the clearinghouse model with utilities, I think what's you've seen in some northeastern states is that you have the utilities providing the state a list of customers, and then the state takes that list, cross-references it with folks who are eligible based on enrollment in other means tested programs like SNAP or Medicaid, and then the state returns a list flagged with which customers should be enrolled to the utility. And I think that's designed to get around some of the privacy concerns that the utilities have. Anyway, I'm not advocating for or against that right now. I'm just throwing it out there as a model option, which I think is worth considering. All right, I'm going to stop and move on to another topic now. I think in either way you go, whether it happens in a one-stop model or a clearinghouse, I think you need to have enrollment both automatically because customers have come in for another means tested program, which then gets them energy assistance. And I think you need a separate enrollment mechanism for customers by request who haven't gone in for a different form of assistance, but say, okay, I need help with my energy bill. And I think it's important to have an online application for people who are, who are coming in through that second, who haven't applied for a different type of assistance, but would like to get into this program. Again, in either case, I think it's important that outreach occurs through community-based organizations. As I mentioned before, I think that's really key. We got to use the trusted messengers who are already in our community. And then the last point I will say which I think does show a specific preference that the energy project has. And that is, if folks are coming in to a community action agency, for LIHEAP, or coming into a community action agency in their communities for another form of assistance, the community action agency should be able to get them hooked up to, whatever this new program is, as well. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Yoki. And yeah, I think I appreciate your comments and helping clarify what we understand to be going on in other places. And I think the goal, and I appreciate everyone else who also had immediate reactions to the two different approaches and sharing those with us. I think the goal for this exercise is to kind of clearly identify, like, how would this work in practice first, and then make sure that we talk about also the challenges, like, oh, I don't know, that sounds like it would be very difficult for us, that as well. But kind of like how, be able to, I'm thinking for James here, if James is going to be kind of writing something up here and make sure he can write out the mechanics of these things when he does.
Hey, Austin, this is Lisa. The only thing I would say about having utilities provide you as the state with a list of all of our customers' names or information about all of our customers and let you cross-reference them, I think a majority of our customers would have a problem with us providing information about them, even though you probably already have it. But I would imagine a majority of our customers would have a problem with that being information that is unnecessary to send to the state. Either one, they don't want that kind of assistance, or two, they don't need that kind of assistance. So why would we be sending their information or bill usage or any of that stuff for cross-referencing? I think if the state already knows who participates in SNAP or whatever the program would be, then that list being provided the other direction is much more appropriate than sending a large list and having somebody else sort through it. I just know from our perspective, our IT people and our data security people would have a problem with that.
Thanks, Lisa, for sharing that concern. And yeah, I think we want to explore what that looks like. Both, does it need to be a certain way, or is there options? How would that work? Even at a very light touch to try and figure some of that out, and how that would work in practice, but what would need to be done. Any other questions or thoughts on this? I noticed Ryan jumped back on, Snohomish. I don't know, Jeff did too. They had any thoughts on the clearinghouse model? I tried my best to explain how I was thinking about it in terms of enrollment. And I did see somebody put in the chat, and it might be that Ryan is still on Zoom, but maybe in a different meeting, I don't know. Someone asked about the community action agencies. I think Yoki articulated that, that both of the models, there's a role, but I think there's a lot of differences between, if like the state would not be the primary contact with the community action agency under a clearinghouse model, the utility would continue to play that role. And I'm sure under both scenarios there would be continue to be interaction with both. It's more about the extent to which and how the information is going back and forth, that sort of thing. A a lot of different things to get into. Okay, well, I appreciate people throwing stuff in the comments too. I don't have time to read all of them, and they come in sometimes in batches, and but I do appreciate them. I do take a look at them afterwards and put them in the context of the conversation. So both James and I appreciate it greatly. All right, James, should we roll on? Then, okay, and in the formal comments, you know, I did limit us to these two models. People might think, no, that's, you know, there's a different way of doing this than these two things that have been put forward, and please feel free to think about that and put that in the formal comments. I'm not trying to limit us to just looking at those two. So outreach. Yoki used the word outreach when we were talking about enrollment. Sorry, Yoki, I'm calling you out. I think there's a question here about what outreach is compared to like what community engagement is versus enrollment. The proviso uses all those terms, and they're all kind of under this accessibility thing, but I think maybe some clarity around that. And I'm going to offer for today's discussion the idea that outreach is kind of the mailers, the, you know, information being sent to households, but not necessarily a interactive conversation. You know, it might even community. I think like a survey is more of community engagement than outreach. Outreach is more about awareness, program awareness in my mind. So any principles that folks want to talk about that they've used at utility programs or other low-income energy assisted or other low-income programs? We have folks from different community organizations, and I'd love to hear if, you know, what successes they have, what things don't work, you know, and need to be improved from other programs that they see, not just in the utility space. So I see Jen put some stuff in the chat, which is great. So any reactions to this first question? Yoki.
Hey, I am just going to call out what Jennifer Frisk put in the chat, which I think is great. You know, mentioning that when you're working with you know, community-based organizations and, you know, nonprofits in different communities to do the outreach, we really need to have funding for those organizations to perform that outreach, because when you're asking, you know, folks who work with, you know, those vulnerable populations, it's important that we're not placing more of a burden on their, you know, on their institutions, but are actually, you know, funding the work that, you know, that needs to get done.
Thanks, Yoki.
Next, I would say that the program should develop a language access plan. So that's kind of a comprehensive assessment at, you know, language needs and strategies. And there's a document from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services that goes into a really good depth. And I know that some utilities in you know, Massachusetts are doing the same for their energy efficiency programs. So I think that a language access plan would be an important part. And last but not least, I'd say also along the lines of language is, you know, outreach just needs to use simple language, which is appropriate for, you know, someone who's at a, you know, a grade school reading level. Thanks.
Thanks, Yoki. People having good comments in the chat, good questions being raised. I'll let people noodle on this principles piece here more and for the formal comments, but just put it out there. You know, I think, you know, something about how often outreach needs to occur. You know, if you're concerned about costs of outreach, which costs are part of a program, and we need to think about, you know, that trade-off for a lot of these things. You know, one idea I saw in our comments, again, we'll get those posted for folks, but somebody had put in one of those that they, I don't know if they were suggesting it or they were saying that they did it as they kind of concentrate their outreach during, you know, right before the heat waves in the summer and right between the cold, frigid winter, you know, right before the cold, frigid winters, because that's when people are ramping up their energy use most for their households. I think that also somewhat coincides with the LIHEAP funding batches, but I could be wrong with that, about that. Anyways, you know, things like that, like, is there other ways of thinking about this? There, you know, a guiding principle about making sure that we, I think we got somebody on. Making sure that we, I lost my train of thought. James is coming on to help me out. No, making sure that our outreach is works in both rural and urban areas, those sorts of things. Like, what are principles that we should consider there? So definitely welcome outside of the box thinking on these. Doesn't, you know, it will help inform maybe not some principles that we come up with to help guide our work, but it might spur other thoughts. So appreciate anything people want to throw in the conversation during the formal comment period. So let's move on, James, and then we'll do this next section and we'll take a break. So we're back to our one-stop shop model, clearinghouse model, and how outreach would work under each of these. Yoki suggested that the community action agencies and other community organizations be a part of any approach. So that would go under both of these categories. I would press Yoki in his comments to elaborate more on how this would look under these two different approaches. I mean, one looks, I think, a lot more like what we have today. Another one would be different. May resemble more of LIHEAP. I don't know. I don't know exactly what outreach is done under LIHEAP. So, or other community programs that are administered by the state. I'd love to hear from community organizations about those as well. Anyways, I will be quiet and ask folks what your guys' thoughts are on this topic. Any immediate reactions? Kelly.
Thanks. I think as far as conducting outreach under the one-stop shop model, I'm just going to speak for Big Bend, not all utilities out there, but I think as far as getting marketing materials out there, promoting the program, that's a far easier lift to ask than one of administering the program. So that's another resource as far as asking utilities, you know, to promote the program. I don't think that that's a hard thing to ask for a statewide program.
So a statewide program would continue to leverage, you know, the relationship between the utility and their customers through, you know, the regular billing process, that sort of thing is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you know, like you said, where we have local relationships and community relationships there, it's far easier for us to get them to contact the statewide program, put flyers out, communicate that to people. I think it's far easier than administering the whole program. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly, for your thoughts. Other folks? See, James, I shouldn't tease breaks because then everybody goes quiet. They all want their break. So I'm gonna have a stop here. I'm not worried about us plowing through this today. And, you know, I think the next few rounds of conversation will be really good too. So let's take a 10-minute break, come back, or a 9-minute break, and come back at 2:25. Right before I got on this call, I was mixing together a drink and it exploded all over my desk. So I'm going to go clean that up. Everyone take a bathroom break, do your thing, and we'll meet back here at 2:25. All right, thanks everyone. All right, James, are you back?
I am.
Great. Let's get the comment document back up while folks get back in their chairs. All right. So let's scroll on to this community engagement. I think you got the old document there, James, because I see the multicultural thing, which is, or maybe it just never cleared it up. But let's change that first while folks get back here so people aren't confused. Let's make that community engagement. So when we talk about community engagement here, I think the intent is that for that term to be used different than outreach. We often mix and mingle those. And so I do see outreach, you know, my perspective just from working with folks over the last year and a half and having no other background in this is that outreach is that kind of one-way flow of information. Hey, here's the program. This is, you know, on a flyer, that sort of thing. Could be email, web banners, that sort of thing. But community engagement to me is a deeper level of conversation between community members and the administrator of the program, or folks who are acting on behalf of the community administrator. So for instance, under the current energy assistance system, that's largely CAP agencies providing some sort of outreach or community engagement with the community on behalf of utilities generally. But there's also other forms of community engagement under that system. I didn't mean to get sidetracked there. So like the utilities have their regular open door meetings, that sort of thing, would be one form of community engagement. So this is kind of asking that question, but for the statewide program. And, you know, I think, again, here, maybe it makes sense to strike the statewide word there, James, and have us just focus generally on low-income energy assistance programs or low-income programs more broadly, about what level of community engagement is desired, what does that look like, what kind of principles guide that. So I'm going to open it up here on this principles question first. Linda.
Sorry, trying to get everything up and running here. Linda Garcia, Policy and Advocacy Manager at Washington State Community Action Partnership. I think one of the most important things is we need to pull in the voice of the communities that we're serving. It's great to hear from the agencies and utilities today, but moving forward, I think having the voice of lived experience would be super relevant and important. As far as outreach, I think we need to gather information about demographics of those we serve, which all of our agencies have those, and make sure that we're hitting all of the populations, not just like the high points. We need to look at cultural awareness and language barriers, and potentially looking at having them partner with by and for organizations who can get word out of a program like this. And then again, obviously pulling it all together with the lived experience voices. I think that's it, but I might pop back in if I think of something else. Thanks, Austin.
All right, thanks, Linda. and from our from the workshop that we had a few weeks ago, you know, I take that first bullet to really be both a comment about the process that we're doing right now and getting input, as well as what a program would need to do regularly. You know, I think another way of thinking about this question might be, you know, as the program is administered, you know, who needs to be at the table to talk about how it's going and that sort of thing. Make sure everything runs smoothly, iron out kinks, that sort of thing. That might be one way of looking at this question, and it might be some sort of combination of you know, leaders of organizations, people with lived experience trying to access programs, that sort of thing. All right, so we got another one here about measurement. I feel like we touched a little bit on this, and I would encourage folks in their written comments to think about each one of these and see if there's redundancy across the question, or if community engagement should be measured in different ways than, say, outreach. For instance, flyers, you know, the amount of flyers that go out or something would be probably a fair measurement, a good starting point. But I would think that community engagement would not be simply how many meetings you hold, because the quality of those meetings and everything else really it matters a lot. And so a metric that at least captures something like that: comments received, number of participants, that sort of thing. I don't know if anyone has any comments on this one. I'll pause for a second. Okay, James, let's move on. So how would community engagement work under a one-stop shop model? How would it work under a clearinghouse model? So in the one-stop shop model, there's a statewide entity administering the program. So it would need to have connections in the community across the state, would need to be representative of you know, have rural and urban inroads, that sort of thing. Would that involve going out into communities and doing work? Does it involve having a sort of steering committee? You know, we're starting to go over into the program administration category here when we talk about that. That sort of thing. What would that look like? Compared to the clearinghouse model, which kind of looks at, my understanding is, again, the clearinghouse model is an information exchange. So it's kind of the utilities have the information, and the question is then, what now? What would they do with that for community engagement? Does that change what's happening right now? How does it empower them, and how would that work? Got a good question from Chelsea. And that's another question for James and me to look at, I think. How does the state currently promote other state public assistance programs? And would this be a good match? I think the idea in the report is that we could start from there and then see if there's better ways of doing those than what's being done today. Okay. A lot to think about here on these ones, so I feel comfortable moving on and not holding us to this, but thank you, Chelsea, for your comment, and others for considering this and thinking about it and putting your comments in a formal comment form once you've had more time. So the final one here is multicultural services. And to be honest, if you were to go back to the study language, I'm not sure if it says multicultural or multilingual. To me, I think we need to look at multicultural services. Multilingual is an important piece of that, but I think it's a broader piece. And so rather than keeping this constrained just to multilingual, I brought in the term perhaps, I'm not sure. At one point I was typing multilingual into the PowerPoint. I thought, is it multilingual or multicultural? I didn't answer that question, so I'll need to do my research. But in any case, we're going to look at multicultural as part of this study and include the multilingual part as that. And we can do that under the language that the statute provides us. This one, I think last time we were talking about multicultural services, and we realized someone put in the chat, I think it was Tacoma, that, hey, do we have the right people here to talk about this, these sort of topics? And I think there's a good point there that we need to do some more outreach and get some folks engaged who work with multicultural communities regularly on this, and who might not have the time for a meeting like this one. But anyways, let's see what ideas we have together. So what are some principles for multicultural services for a statewide low-income energy assistance programs? Thanks, Stephanie, for the comment for all of this. That's a good thing to keep in mind, good principle. Linda, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, trying to figure out how to form this based on our recent survey results. Multicultural and multilingual are definitely very different, but the same, if that makes sense. Involving the community action agencies that are in those communities would be vital in this instance, because there is a trust level built there. There's familiarity and comfort. The majority of our CAPs have staff that not only speak multiple languages, but have that cultural sensitivity by either having worked within those cultural communities, or being part of that population. And so I think that would be priority one, as far as how to navigate through that process. As far as outreach, I'll go back to the partnering with by and for organizations to make sure that you're hitting the targets that are specifically in certain cultures, and the populations with more language barriers. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. Any other thoughts here? Okay, let's move on and see. These are similar questions, I think. But I think there is some differentiation here for us to think about. I think Chelsea's question is one here that I'm really interested in, is what services are being provided already by the state. Could we just tap into those? Perhaps our community organizations on the phone know about that, could tell us a little bit about that, but and what the caps have available to them, and then also kind of what's missing out of that group of resources. I think with multicultural services, I'm always we have this diversity that we need to talk about, and what does that look like in different areas of the state, and how would we make sure that we are measuring success in a way that captures that diversity across the state and rural and urban areas, that sort of thing. So I'll stop there with those two questions. Anybody has any thoughts? Just got a message that people are having a hard time hearing me. James, are you having a hard time hearing me? Or some high-pitched squeaks?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a little bit of feedback. Not sure if somebody has their mic on. Yeah, it looks like everybody else is muted.
Well, okay, if it continues, let me know, James, and I'll transition over.
That sounds much better to me already.
Okay. All right, and then I think we have the same set of questions here under a one-stop shop model or the clearinghouse model. What do multicultural services look like? What should be part of that for the statewide model, the one-stop shop, and then what for that statewide clearinghouse? Are we does the information need to contain some of that? Like what information would be available, and then what would utilities and other folks administering programs do with that information? I think are the kind of the questions that I have under the clearinghouse. John put in grants for community-based cultural organizations to engage. I think that would be one opportunity under either models would be my initial thought. But what's that funding source? I guess would be the question. Is the state doing that, and then how did that get connected back to the utility if it was under the clearinghouse? Could we leverage existing grants and just put in energy assistance programs under either model approach? Does it need to be specific to energy assistance, that sort of thing? How complicated is it if it's a requirement and a grant that a community-based organization, cultural organization coordinate with a state program that's one-stop shop versus having a utility focus? Like that to me sounds like it could be different depending on the state and overlapping utility areas. Perhaps it's not that big of a challenge. I don't know. Would like folks' input on that at some point, maybe in the comments. Okay, James, it looks like we got one more question down here. Is that just the clearinghouse one? And did we miss anything else?
It's like that's the last one.
Okay. Well, we got a quiet bunch today, James, but that's okay. There's a lot to digest here and to think about. And my goal is to try and get these questions out as quick as possible so folks have time to think about them, even if it means publishing things, some initial drafts that might contain errors, as we saw today. Thanks, James, for helping clean those up. So what I want to do next with our time here, maybe we can wrap up by 3, is kind of go through what our schedule is going to look like going forward, what our next steps are with this work, that sort of thing. So I'm going to open up our slide deck again. And then we'll take a look at the schedule in particular. Oops, here we go. Next steps. So we're going to have a comment deadline on August 11th. And what you'll notice is that is a week longer than our last one. And then you might notice that that's different than what we had under the accelerated timeline of that January 1st deadline, where every comment period was every 2 weeks. I put it at 3 weeks because I thought folks might want more time. And so we will do it 3 weeks this time, and then I'll gather input at the next workshop as to whether you felt 3 weeks was sufficient, or 2 weeks is good and keeps you on schedule more than having a little extra time. I also realize that August is a month that a lot of people take off and enjoy. And so I wanted to also give us some extra time that way through this summer. If for some reason you have a hard time meeting the Friday, August 11th deadline, we are a public agency, always open to public comment, but this really helps us keep the trains running on time. So the best that you can do to meet that deadline is really appreciated. Our next workshop will be on August 21st at 1 p.m. It's in the illustrative schedule, and I put it on the web page, just the title. That workshop is going to turn to 2 other program design elements. One is and it's under what I've termed the deliverability of assistance. So this gets into questions of, I think the general idea is that the assistance would, no matter where the funding source would come from, at least under the one-stop shop model, it would be applied right to customer accounts for electricity, utilities, and directly for natural gas utility customers as well. That seems quite straightforward, but there might be other things that folks want to look at, such as grants, rather than just a monthly bill assistance provision. So we'll check in, see if there's other alternatives that folks really want to explore, if we kind of have a good consensus around a monthly bill amount. And then the question becomes, okay, how is that delivered? Yoki talked about tiered incomes today. That's one offer, tiered discounts based on income, which some of the investor-owned utilities have applied and are starting to implement. And then there's other opportunities that might come along with improved data that we could, personalize it and pursue reducing household energy burdens for low-income customers to 6% of their household income, so that they would no longer be energy burdened, at least as we define that under CETA at this point. That raises questions about whether 6% is the right number, other things. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of that, but we'll start the conversation. And then in that deliverability part, the other piece to that I think is crucial is the funding mechanism, the proviso, the statute that in the budget tells us we have to look at funding and how it might implement the program, or how it might affect the program design. And so it's not about having a discussion about which funding source should be chosen. It's more about in getting those we need to first identify them, which we took a stab at the last workshop, but it's thinking about, okay, if we choose this mechanism, then what would that mean for program design? What questions does that raise? What considerations does that raise? And then, how would that influence the design of a program? And I think there are some differences there, in our energy assistance report that we published this past year, highlighted some of those as part of the requirements under the law, but there's more that we need to think about there. So those two things are like the deliverability of the assistance, or like how that's going to be done, electric, natural gas, but also wood, propane, that sort of thing. And then there's the funding mechanism and how that would influence the ability to provide assistance to low-income households, and how that would influence the rest of the program design. So those will be the two big topics that we start a conversation on August 21st. And the following comment deadline will be September 8th. That's 3 weeks again. If folks want to go back to 2 weeks, we can do that too. And we will post those materials ahead of time. So those are the kind of the workshop things that we do. Does anyone have any questions about any of that before I move on to one final request that I have of folks? Okay. And as always, here are the names and titles of folks that are working on this. If you need to reach out to anyone, you can reach out to these people here. I'm probably your best direct contact, and if we need to get others, folks, and James as well, let me know. So the final thing, what I'll do is I'll pull up the webpage. This is our workshop agenda for today. So this is our CEDA Energy Assistance webpage. If you're not already signed up for our
Yeah, Austin, I hate to cut in, but we're just looking at the PowerPoint right now.
Uh-oh, thanks for cutting in. I appreciate that, James. Let's see here. All right, here's our webpage. Might look a little bit different because I do have the controls for editing the webpage, and that's what's being shown here at the top. But this is the webpage generally. You can subscribe here for our regular bulletins. I doubt we'll have one go out this week. It'll probably come out next on Monday with the information today about the recording, the public comments, everything will be there. The comment deadline. Here's our state program design study. This stuff is related to section 120. If you scroll down, this is the work we're working on right now in this workshop materials. You'll see here, this is where you can submit the comments, the formal comments for this workshop. We have questions here. Some of them will look very familiar to the ones we talked about today, but other ones are slightly bit different. And for instance, we have a question about national best practices. So if you know some of those, you can provide references. That would be great in informing our work. I also ask, like for our utilities, what has been successful in your local outreach, or for community organizations, what's been really successful, that sort of thing. So there's a fair amount of questions here, but just I want folks to think about them, but also not be too worried. Everything you can help us think through helps us, and the comments that we got this last time are just so great, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time. Submit those will be posted on our webpage, and so it really does matter if you submit stuff to us and take a look at these. So please do. So that's that comment form, and then the other one is right here. This is a survey, and what we want to do is part of this work is make sure that we reach out to community organizations, multicultural, low-income organizations, that sort of group, and get their input on this as well. And we are asking folks to, complete a survey of organizations they regularly work with that, we make sure are on our list to go talk to. We'll do between all the programs that we have at Commerce and then DSHS, others, we will kind of pull together some community workshops, if you will, with folks with low income organizations, and set some time aside for getting their input. And so if you go down here, if you got an organization, so let's say this is not a low income organization, per se, but Department of Commerce, you start typing, it pulls up a contact at that organization, a phone number, email, information for each one of these. Just complete the ones that you want. I put 20 here. You can put a send copy of response and hit submit. If you don't have a phone number, just an email, don't have a website, that's okay. We'll take what we can get, and we can do some follow-up research if need be. That is there for folks, and that'll help inform, make sure we don't miss anybody. Linda.
I am so sorry, Austin. I was trying to flip between screens and I missed how you got to that low income survey page. I'd like to send it out to our network, but I couldn't find it when I was searching just now. Can you kind of re-go over that very quickly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this is the if you type in CETA energy assistance, it'll pull up on Google.
Yep, I've got that page open. I just wasn't sure where to go from the page.
Yeah, and so I mean that's the great thing. This web page, because we have so much work going on, it's starting to grow, and so it will like this is going to go into the past workshops, and I will need to think about how we clean this up some. But if you go down to this elements of program accessibility comment deadline and low income organization contact survey for August 11th. It is the bottom one here. Here, survey for low income community organization contacts. That one. So you should be able to see that. If you don't have it, and maybe you just have the web page open from earlier today, I include refreshing it because I posted it before the workshop.
That's exactly what I had to do just now. I just had to refresh it. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you for pointing it out.
Oh, I apologize. I couldn't get it out earlier. I can't see hands, so I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions from anyone before we go? All right. Well, you do have my email. You should have James' email. Let us know if you have any questions as you go through the comment process and continue thinking about this work. I really appreciate everybody tuning in today and for grappling with these big questions. It's a lot to consider. Encourage folks, to keep in mind that this is, just thinking about a program. It's a largely conceptual thing that we're doing right now. We'll try and do some nuts and bolts as well as we go through the year. But really appreciate folks taking the time to think about this, to participate today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all later in August at our workshop that'll discuss the delivery of the assistance and funding. So thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a great rest of your summer if I don't see you around, at least till August 21st. So bye now.
Thanks, Austin.